Well, good morning, church. It is good to see you. It's good to be back and worshiping with you. I worshiped with you last week, just not here, right? But as the church, we worship together far and wide. You know, I had the really unique opportunity to get to be the keynote speaker at the New England Church of Christ Youth Rally last week. Our old friends, the McMillans, called me up, and so it was really cool. I mean, this is an area of the country where the church is not exactly bolsterous, right? Okay, they have the 4 least religious states in America. The least amount of people who claim to be Christian in the country is usually that New England area. And so watching these teens come together and worship God together and encourage one another was very, very powerful. The thing is, I did that last weekend, and I had taken last week, the week between now and then, off. And so here we are. And I do not have a new minor prophet sermon ready for you, okay? And I know you're super disappointed not to get Haggai or Obadiah this morning, as you should be, because it's great stuff, okay? But frankly speaking, you are getting an edited version of the Connecticut sermon I did last week, all right? But it's for Centerville. It's a little different. And so the theme of our youth rally the last weekend was Be Real. Now, the inspiration from this came from a brand new app. Some of you know about this, but for those of you over the age of 30, I'll explain it, okay? Because you don't know, though, do you? You don't know. And put it this way, Be Real, this app, was the #1 app in 2022. I don't know who decides that, but in 2022, it was the #1 social media app going around. A lot of our teens here have it. I downloaded it because I needed to figure out what it was for the retreat because I just turned 30. But it's interesting. The thing about Be Real is it goes against the grain of all other social media, okay? Especially Instagram, but also Facebook. In fact, some people are referring to this as anti-social media. Because when you think about things like Instagram, and you think about things like Facebook, and you think about sharing your life, and especially posting pictures, you don't share the doldrums and the boring elements of your life, right? You don't share pictures of yourself doing the dishes. You don't share photos of yourself doing homework for Teen Row, right? You know, those are the boring things. Those are the things we share on Facebook or on Instagram. We share going on vacation, right? We share buying a new car. We share going to prom. Those are the kind of things that we put out there. Not the everyday life that you and I live, but the really exciting things, the big things. And what it does is it fosters a sense of inauthenticity, yeah? I mean, if we are only seeing the highlights of each other's lives, we're thinking that all the other people out there are living this crazy, insane, ultimate, beautiful lifestyle, and you or I are the only ones stuck doing the dishes and slitting on our bathrobe, right? It kind of has that kind of a feeling. And in fact, when you do post pictures on those sites, a lot of times you have filters to put on, right? Filters that make you look a lot better than you actually do. It takes away all the blemishes, takes away all the stray hairs, stuff like that. You ever meet somebody or you know somebody in person, and then you find their Facebook account, and think to yourself, yeah, they don't look like that. they don't look like that in real life, you know? But this new app, Be Real, what it does is if you download it, it sends out one notification a day at a random time to everybody at the same time. It could be 4:37 p.m., it could be 8:52 a.m., just a random time throughout the day. Everybody who has the app gets a notification. You have 2 minutes to take a picture, front and back, front camera and the back camera, of where you are, what you're doing. There's no time to go make it look like your life is exciting. There's no time to put on your makeup, okay? You have to be honest about what you're doing, where you are, who you are, and what you look like, and so on. Okay, there's no filters that you get to add on it either. And what it's trying to do is create an environment of honesty and vulnerability and reality among a people who these days are living through filters, right? And so that's what Be Real is about. So we took that kind of inspiring message, or at least the idea of that, and we talked to the teens last week about being real. We talked about being real with yourself, the fact that you are a broken, sinful human being. But then we try to take that and say, you know, but that is not the most real you. That is not the most real thing about you, that you are broken and that you are sinful. More real than that is the fact that you are a child of God, right? That you are created in His image. That's who you really are. And we should not let anybody tell us otherwise. Then we talked about being real with God, and we talked about the kind of things that you've heard me talk about before, the lament psalms especially, being honest with God about our emotions, whether that's mad or sad or confused or frustrated with God. The Bible gives us plenty of examples of being honest to God about that. And then the last lesson that we use, and the one I preached to them on Sunday morning, and I'm coming back to share with you today, is the idea that we need to focus on being real with each other as well, right? Be real with ourselves, be real with God. But while we're here in the same place, let's talk about being real with each other. And you know what? This might be the hardest one yet, okay? Because humanity as a whole has a real hard time not being phony with one another, don't we? I mean, I literally just described all these new technologies that we have invented so that we can project out into the abyss a manicured, cultivated, perfect little persona of ourselves out in the world for other people to see so that they don't actually have to see the real us. Haven't we used our intelligence and our resources to create those kind of things? We have an awful time being real with each other. We don't want to share our true selves. And in fact, the people who do put it all out there on social media, the people who do post every meal, every thought, everything that pops into their head, we think they're crazy. Okay? Right? It's like we didn't need to know all that, Betsy. Okay? You know, we have this kind of expectation that people won't be that real, that people won't be that vulnerable with each other. We expect a level of fakeness wherever we go. You know, but what's worse than that is the areas that I grew up in. And you guys know this. You live in Southwest Ohio, but I had to inform the Connecticut church about this. That growing up in Tennessee and growing up in Texas, bless your heart is not a little Christian prayer, okay? They are fake with you in more godly ways, okay? You know, what I told them there was that, you know, bless your heart, it's code for oh, you dummy. And I apologized to Alex, but I told them, I was like, oh, you think the Red Sox are going to make the playoffs next year? Oh, bless your heart. And I got more feedback from that than anything else. They did not like that. You know, these are the Facebook, you know, the bless your heart. These are humorous examples. But we all know that being two-faced, being deceitful is no laughing matter, right? It's no laughing matter. How many of us still have scars from being stabbed in the back from someone that we thought we knew? How many of us go to work or go to school not knowing who we can trust and who we can't? How many of us are wearing a mask this morning thinking to ourselves, well, if they really knew the real me, if they knew the real me, they'd be disgusted by me. If they really knew me, they wouldn't want to be around me. They wouldn't like me anymore. You know, it's no laughing matter, is it? You know, the masks, the lies, the fakeness, the filters, they're dangerous. That's what they are. They're dangerous. And ultimately, they are tools in Satan's toolbox to get us to miss out on that full and abundant life that God has created for us to enjoy. Okay? That's what it is. And it's important that we recognize that so that we can reclaim the true relationships and the true community that you and I were created to enjoy. And we were indeed created to enjoy them. That's exactly the case. Just think back to those earliest creation stories in Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. As God was creating the world and the universe as we know it, he kept saying that it was good, right? The light was good. The land was good. The plants, the animals, they were good. Over and over again, God declares what he has created is good. But there was one thing that he said was not good. What was that? Genesis 2:18. That man should be alone. It is not good for humans, for each of us, to be alone. And yet, when we refuse to be real with one another, to be honest about our relationships, to be true about our feelings and who we are and how we relate to other people, when we refuse to do that, we isolate ourselves. We create an isolation that is more real than the people we're sitting next to in this sense. You can sit in a room of 150 people and still be completely isolated if we resist being open and honest with each other, right? You know, we can sit beside a room full of people, and if we're not open and honest, if we're not real with each other, we're still in isolation. I mean, you think about this opening story. Do you think Adam and Eve were fake with one another? That they pretended to be this or they pretended to be that instead of being real with each other? Of course not. Be a very awkward garden if it was, right? Because there's just the two of them, okay? They didn't. Not until the fall. Not until when sin entered into the world and started causing them to put up barriers and started causing them to blame each other and factioning and dividing between them. That's when that stuff happened. When sin entered the world, when Satan got his hands in what was good. That's not what we were created for. And so it's not good for us to be alone since the very beginning. But you can go back even further than that. I did this example a few months ago, so if you remember it, good for you. If not, you'll learn it again, okay? But before God created man and woman, he had already decided that it was not good for us to be alone. It was already set in stone before there was even a man and a woman. Know that? Just look back at Genesis 1. This is verses 26 through 27, right before the creation of man. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Now you might be thinking, this doesn't say anything about community. This doesn't say anything about relationships. But doesn't it? Look a little closer. Let us make them in our image, right? There's some relationship happening there. Here's the thing, folks. We are created in the image of a Trinitarian God, okay? We are made in the image of a Trinitarian God. We are made in the image of a God that exists in community. You know, and I know the Trinity is not exactly a popular thing to preach about these days. It's complex, it's confusing, it's intimidating, but it really has so many important implications, not least of which is what we're saying right now. That because we are made in the image and likeness of a God who has existed from everlasting in community, in relationship, you and I are supposed to exist in true and honest and intimate community. That's what we are made for. We can't get around it, guys. We can't get around this need for other people. We need to be in relationships with one another. And I think, you know, Jesus, it's a little nugget that I don't think many people would have thought of, but Jesus sums this up really nicely in a prayer that he prays shortly before going to the cross in John 17. He says, "My prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message," talking about the apostles there, "that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you have sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me." You can kind of hear the correlation there, right? The comparison and the desire to reflect the unity between the Father and the Son. The unity between the adopted children of God as Christians. The unity that wants to exist between the Father and the Son and his church. You can see that, right? You know, we are clearly meant to reflect that kind of divine community that has existed since everlasting. That is what is meant for us. That is what the church should look like, okay? A little philosophical, theological nugget, if I can go on a rabbit trail. I think I'm ahead of time, right? So, no, I'm behind time. I'm going to do it anyway, all right? If God is love, what did God love, or who did God love, before the creation of the world? Did he need to have a creation to love the creation? If so, then God's dependent on creation, if he is in its very essence love. Or did he just like singularly love himself in this kind of egotistical way? That's not really, if that's the case, then God would have created a creation just to worship him in an egotistical kind of way. But if God exists in Trinity, if there is three in one, and there is a love and relationship and a giving and taking between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, then that can be a perfect love. That then, like a mother and a father who love each other and want to pour that love out into a new child, as we have a few around here, that God creates us out of an overflow of the love that already exists in the Godhead that we get to join into and enjoy and participate in. Isn't that cool? So like, this is, you know, and in fact, the reason I bring that up is John 17:24. The next verse is kind of one of the key verses if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, which I did. So once again, we are created to be truly together because of our truly together kind of God. And what's so sad about this is that the church, the people who claim to know this truth, we've been some of the worst at living this out, haven't we? We've been some of the worst at this. Not to burst anybody's bubble, but we got a reputation out in the world of being a bunch of two-faced hypocrites who lie to each other and pretend to be perfect on Sunday. That's what a lot of the world thinks about the church, okay? Now, is that exaggerated? Is that a true description of what the church is? No. There's always a little bit of truth behind exaggerations, isn't there? You know, there's something there. We've experienced this. You probably have a firsthand account of something like that. And it absolutely breaks my heart. There's an old Casting Crowns song I grew up listening to that used to refer to this kind of experience in the church as the stained glass masquerade. I always thought that imagery was really cool. Stained glass masquerade, that we come into the sacred space and put on a mask so that others don't see what's really happening in our lives. And we can look just as perfect and just as happy and just as together as everyone else around us. And yet, 90% of the time, the person you're looking at that you think is happy and perfect and together, they're wearing a mask too. It's a show, right? We all wind up more isolated and more hurt because we've been robbed of the opportunity to be there for one another because we act like we're fine, because we're not real with one another. And we don't have the opportunity to bear one another's burdens, right? Galatians 6:2. We're robbed of that opportunity. And that's just, this is just between us. This is just between brothers and sisters in Christ. We haven't even mentioned how this keeps people away from Jesus, people who are not a part of the church. You know how many times I've heard people say, oh, I can't come to church. I'm not good enough to come to church. One time is too many times, right? But I've heard it way too many times. And I wonder how many people would wander into the loving arms of Jesus if we would just cultivate an environment of vulnerability and honesty in our church families, right? How many people would wander into the loving arms of Jesus if we would just cultivate an environment of vulnerability and honesty and reality in our church families, okay? And now, obviously, I'm not calling us all to get behind the mic and start airing our grievances and talking about our issues, okay? A big confessional line is not what I'm inviting you to this morning. I don't really think that would be super wise or healthy either. But we can discern appropriate ways to be real with each other, right? I mean, frankly, we've got to. We've got to. Something as simple as not feeling the need to brush aside everybody with, oh, I'm fine. How are you today? I'm fine. I'm good. Whatever. When it's not true. We don't need to do that. In fact, last week after preaching the sermon, the guy who got up and did announcements was like, well, I'll start. I got up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. So if I'm being nasty with you today, I apologize, but that's where I'm at. It can be lighthearted. It doesn't have to be grave. We don't have to start talking about our deepest, darkest issues, but we got to start finding appropriate ways to be real with each other. Or choosing to come to the community with our pain and our doubts, okay? Instead of trying to swallow all that, come to the community. Come to your accountability partners, to your friends, to your mentors in Christ. Come and be open about that and share that. Or I think a big one would be finding appropriate places to bear our scars with one another. Because if you have a scar from something in your life, odds are somebody else has suffered that same injury. They've been hurt in that same way. They've gone through a very similar experience. And their wound might be fresh. Their wound might be open today. And you might be on the other side of it. You still got scars, okay? But you found healing through a journey with Jesus. And if you had an opportunity to share that with somebody, to show them your scars and let them know that there is another side to this, okay? That there is a journey and that there is healing, that could be huge. And if we're not real with each other, we rob ourselves of that opportunity. Do you see what I'm saying? And really, I think small groups are really helping with this. I don't know about your small group, but I know that ours, we spend a large percentage of our time sharing what's going on in our lives in an appropriate, healthy way, and then praying for one another. And I hope that's happening. But I'm just saying we got to find practical steps to do this. Just a couple lines from this Casting Crowns song. The performance is convincing. and we know every line by heart. Only when no one is watching can we really fall apart. But would it set me free if I dared to let you see the truth behind the person you imagine me to be? But if the invitation's open to every heart that's broken, maybe we can close the curtain on the stained glass masquerade. I love it. I just think it's so well put. And I know that this is one of those things that's easier said than done, right? It's one thing to say we want to be a people of honesty and transparency and to be real with one another. It's another thing to actually have to do it. To actually face somebody and say, you know, your comments last week, they really hurt me, right? Or when someone asks you how you're doing, to say, you know what? Not great. I could really use your prayers for peace of mind over this next week because something that's going on at work. That takes bravery, right? That takes bravery. That doesn't just happen. And I think it's going to take being tuned into the Spirit if we're going to be able to be that real with one another. It's not going to happen on our own free volition. It's going to be something that God does within us. But I also think it will lead to full and abundant life, right? I think if we chose to live like that, it would lead to full and abundant life. I think it would bear good fruit. I think it would help us be the first step in transforming our community. I think it'd be the first step in transforming the world. Because I think that it is of God, right? This is what he's inviting us into. And really, just kind of as we wrap up here, all that this is an invitation to be like Jesus, okay? That's all it is. It's an invitation to be like Jesus, okay? A man who was real with others wherever he went, okay? He called out the oppressors, didn't he? He had mercy on those who were hurting. He cried at the death of his friend. He flipped over tables in indignation. You know, he celebrated and dined with his friends. He was anguished. He was joyful. He was sorrowful. But he was never fake, right? He was never fake. The perfect human life, an example for you and me, was totally real with others. And that's what we should be striving towards, guys. That's the example that has been set for us to strive towards, to live that kind of honest life with one another. And I like the way that Paul puts it here in 2 Corinthians. The Corinthians being a bit coy with Paul, right? Kind of keeping him at arm's length. They've heard some things, and they're kind of pushing back against Paul. And so in this letter up to this point, Paul's been actually pretty honest, pretty vulnerable, pretty real with the Corinthians. And he gets to this point in chapter 6, and he says, "We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and we have opened wide our hearts to you. We are not withholding our affection from you, but you are withholding yours from us. As a fair exchange, I speak to you as my children. Open wide your hearts also." Now, this is the invitation today, brothers and sisters. You know, open wide your hearts. The good, the bad, and the ugly. To be real with one another. And as a church, as the people of God, not just here, but all over. Right? Not just in Centerville, not just in Connecticut, but that the church would be people who would open wide their hearts to one another and be real. I want us to show the world what heavenly community can really look like. And then I want them to be able to see that, and I want to be able to invite them into this family, into this place where they can be truly known and truly loved, right? We've been saying that a lot recently. I want others to know that this is a place where they can be truly known and truly loved. It's a resurrected community following a resurrected Lord into resurrected life. If you'd like to join that family this morning, if you're here and you want to experience something that is more real than anything this world has to offer, we invite you to accept that gift this morning through baptism. You need only to come as we stand and as we sing.